of death. Maternal mortality rates in the 1850s ranged from 1 in 200 births in wealthy households to 1 in 30 in working-class neighborhoods. But surviving childbirth only intensified a woman's legal vulnerabilities. Undercover, children belonged absolutely to their fathers. A woman had no legal relationship to her own offspring. If she attempted to leave an abusive marriage, her husband could forbid her from seeing her children ever again. If she died, her husband could give the children away without consulting her family. If he chose to beat or abuse the children, she had no legal power to intervene. For poor women, the situation was even more desperate. Parliamentary investigations in the 1860s documented cases of fathers selling their children into industrial labor or sexual slavery, with mothers powerless to intervene. In the textile districts of Manchester, factory inspectors found children as young as 5 working 14-hour days in dangerous conditions because their fathers had contracted their labor for drinking money. The constant threat of pregnancy meant that a woman's body was never her own. Elizabeth Wolstenholme, writing in 1869, described the reality. A married woman exists in a state of perpetual violation. She cannot control when or how often she becomes pregnant, cannot limit the size of her family, and cannot protect her health from the ravages of repeated childbirth. Medical records from the London Lying-in Hospital show that many women were pregnant almost continuously throughout their reproductive years, with some bearing 15 or more children. Working-class women faced additional horrors. With no maternity leave and no legal right to rest during pregnancy, they were forced to work in factories, mines, and domestic service until the moment of labor. The 1842 Parliamentary Report on the Employment of Women and Children in Mines documented pregnant women crawling through coal tunnels on their hands and knees, hauling carts of coal, even while in active labor. The economic stranglehold poverty as control. Victorian marriage was designed to create complete economic dependence that made escape impossible for all but the most wealthy and determined women. Even women who worked outside the home had no legal right to their earnings. Undercover, every penny a woman earned belonged to her husband, who could spend it as he chose, save it, or simply refuse to give her access to money for basic necessities. The case of Ellen Woodhouse, a successful dressmaker in Birmingham, illustrates this economic trap. Despite building a thriving business with over 20 employees by 1856, Ellen had no legal claim to the profits. Her husband James, who contributed nothing to the business, regularly withdrew money from the accounts to fund his gambling and drinking. When Ellen attempted to open a separate bank account in 1858, the bank refused, explaining that married women could not own property or enter contracts. "I've built an empire," Ellen wrote to her sister, only to watch a fool destroy it coin by coin. Working-class women faced even more brutal economic realities. In the textile mills of Lancashire, married women comprised nearly half the workforce by 1860. Yet, they could not touch their wages. Mill owners paid husbands directly, even when wives performed the labor. Parliamentary investigations revealed that many husbands would collect their wives' wages on Friday afternoon, spend them in taverns by Saturday night, then beat their wives on Sunday for failing to provide adequate meals. The economic trap extended beyond wages to inheritance and property. When Mary Jane Turner inherited her father's profitable bakery in 1862, the property automatically transferred to her husband upon marriage, despite his complete ignorance of the business. Within 2 years, he had sold the bakery, spent the proceeds, and left Mary Jane destitute. She had no legal recourse and no claim to the business she had helped build from childhood. Divorce, even for wealthy women, offered no economic escape. The few women who successfully obtained legal separations discovered they had no right to alimony or support. When Caroline Norton finally secured a legal separation from her violent husband in 1855, she received no financial settlement despite his substantial wealth. She was forced to support herself through writing while he retained all marital property. The Matrimonial Causes Act of 1857, which established civil divorce proceedings, maintained women's economic disadvantage. While men could divorce wives for simple adultery, women had to prove adultery combined with cruelty, bigamy, or incest. Even successful female petitioners received minimal financial settlements. Court records show that women typically received less than 20% of marital assets with no ongoing support. For working-class women, formal divorce was financially impossible. The legal costs of £500 to £1,000 represented more than a working man's total earnings for 5 years. These women remained trapped in violent marriages with no legal or economic alternatives. Abandoning the marriage meant abandoning any claim to shelter, income, or children, a choice between physical survival and legal destitution. The medical conspiracy, science as subjugation. The Victorian medical establishment provided scientific justification for women's subjugation within marriage, pathizing any resistance to male authority as mental illness. Leading physicians declared that women's reproductive organs made them inherently unstable, childlike, and incapable of rational thought. Dr. Henry Maudsley, one of Britain's most respected psychiatrists, wrote in 1874, "The female constitution is dominated by the reproductive system. Women are essentially ovarian in their mental and moral characteristics." This medical misogyny had devastating practical consequences. Physicians routinely diagnosed rebellious wives with hysteria, moral insanity, or nymphomania for behaviors that would be considered normal in men. The medical journal, The Lancet, published detailed case studies of women committed to asylums for excessive reading, refusing sexual intercourse, or expressing political opinions. Dr. Isaac Baker Brown, president of the Medical Society of London, performed thousands of clitorectomies on married women throughout the 1860s, claiming that sexual pleasure in women caused insanity, epilepsy, and criminal behavior. His book on the curability of certain forms of insanity, epilepsy, catalepsy, and hysteria in females provided detailed instructions for surgically removing women's clitorises to cure their unnatural desires for independence or education. The case of Rosina Bulwer-Lytton, wife of novelist Edward Bulwer-Lytton, exemplifies how medical authority supported marital tyranny. When Rosina publicly criticized her husband's novels in 1858, he had her committed to a private asylum, claiming she suffered from puerperal mania. Despite examinations by multiple physicians who found her completely sane, she remained imprisoned for 3 weeks until public outcry forced her release. "Any woman who displeases her husband," she later wrote, "may find herself declared mad and locked away forever." Private madhouses became dumping grounds for inconvenient wives. Parliamentary investigations in the 1860s revealed that many asylum inmates were sane women whose husbands had committed them to gain control of their property or to pursue affairs. The alleged Lunatics' Friends Society, founded in 1845, documented hundreds of cases of women illegally confined by their husbands with the complicity of corrupt physicians. Medical texts prescribed brutal treatments for female disorders. Dr. Silas Ware Mitchell's rest cure inflicted on thousands of women involved complete isolation, forced bed rest, and prohibition of reading, writing, or intellectual activity. Women were force-fed rich foods until they gained massive amounts of weight, creating additional health problems. Charlotte Perkins Gilman, who endured Mitchell's treatment, wrote, "I came so near the borderline of utter mental ruin that I could see over." Childbirth medicine deliberately increased women's suffering and dependence despite evidence that skilled midwives achieved better outcomes. Physicians campaigned to eliminate female birth attendants and medicalize childbirth. Dr. Charles Maggs, author of the Standard Obstetrics textbook, declared that pain during childbirth was divinely ordained and that relieving it would rob women of their natural maternal character. Many physicians refused to use available anesthetics during labor, claiming that pain was necessary for proper maternal bonding. The medical establishment also provided pseudoscientific justification for marital rape. Dr. William Acton's influential text declared that healthy women had no sexual desires and that wives who enjoyed intercourse were nymphomaniacs requiring medical treatment. This medical opinion was used in courts to justify unlimited male sexual access within marriage, as judges ruled that wives who resisted were mentally ill rather than asserting legitimate rights. The rare escapes when the system failed to hold. Despite the overwhelming legal, economic, and social barriers, some Victorian women managed to escape their marital prisons through extraordinary courage, family support, or sheer desperate determination. Their stories illuminate both the system's brutality and the remarkable strength of those who defied it. Caroline Norton's battle against cover began with personal tragedy, but evolved into systematic legal reform. After years of separation from her children, she embarked on a relentless campaign to change custody laws. Her pamphlet, The Separation of Mother and Child by the Law of Custody of Infants Considered, exposed the horrors of absolute paternal rights to a shocked public. Despite facing social ostracism and financial ruin, she lobbied Parliament for years until the Custody of Infants Act of 1839 granted mothers limited access to children under 7. The wealthy Americanized Frances Wright chose a different path. She never married at all, scandalizing society by living openly with her lover and bearing children outside wedlock. "I will not," she declared in 1829, "place myself voluntarily in the position of a slave." Wright's financial independence allowed her to reject marriage entirely, but she paid the price in social isolation and constant public attack. Some working-class women found escape through the informal networks of female solidarity that existed beneath official society. In London's East End, women created underground railways of safe houses where abused wives could hide with their children. A few privileged women used their family connections to circumvent covertures' restrictions. When Lady Constance Grosvenor's husband proved financially irresponsible, her father quietly established trusts that kept her inheritance beyond her husband's reach. This required expensive legal maneuvering available only to the extremely wealthy, but it allowed some women to maintain economic independence within marriage. The most dramatic escapes involved complete abandonment of respectable society. Even successful escapes carried enormous costs. Women who left their marriages faced social death, economic hardship, and permanent separation from their children. Society treated them as fallen women, making employment and respectable housing nearly impossible to obtain. Yet some found freedom worth any price. As Caroline Norton wrote after finally achieving legal separation, "I am poor. I am scorned. I am alone, but I am no longer a slave." These exceptional women revealed the cracks in Victorian marriage's seemingly impenetrable facade. Their struggles, widely publicized through newspapers and pamphlets, began to awaken public consciousness to the institution's inherent brutality. By the 1870s, their combined voices had created the first sustained challenge to covertures' absolute authority, laying groundwork for the legal reforms that would slowly, incrementally begin to restore women's humanity under the law. Yet even these victories remained limited and precarious. The vast majority of Victorian wives never escaped their legal and domestic prisons. They lived and died as their husband's property, their stories unrecorded, their suffering unacknowledged by the very society that proclaimed marriage the foundation of Christian civilization. Today, we walk past Victorian houses with their elegant facades and imagine drawing rooms filled with gentile conversation. We see the photographs of couples in their wedding finery and assume we understand their world. But in those silent rooms behind those heavy curtains lived women whose legal existence had been extinguished as thoroughly as if they had died. Their stories remind us that respectability and brutality have always been intimate companions, that progress and oppression can wear the same face. Perhaps that is the most unsettling truth of all, that a society can perfect the art of cruelty while congratulating itself on its moral refinement. In the shadowed halls of medieval Norman courts, a legal doctrine took root that would strangle the lives of women for 8 centuries. Coverture, the word itself means covering, emerged from feudal custom as a system of legal obliteration so complete that it rendered married women invisible in the eyes of the law. By marriage, according to Sir William Blackstone's commentaries on the laws of England, the husband and wife are one person in law. That is, the very being or legal existence of the woman is suspended during her marriage, or at least is incorporated or consolidated into that of her husband under whose wing, protection, and cover she performs everything. This was not metaphor. This was the binding legal reality that governed every aspect of a Victorian woman's existence from the moment she spoke her marriage vows. In effect, a woman surrendered her legal existence on marriage. She ceased to exist as a person capable of owning property, entering contracts, or even controlling her own body. Prior to marriage, a woman could freely execute a will, enter into contracts, sue or be sued in her own name, and sell or give away her real estate. When 19-year-old Caroline Norton married George Norton in 1827, she ceased to exist as a person under British law. Her property, her earnings, her children, even her physical body belonged entirely to her husband. She could not sign contracts, could not sue or be sued, could not own property, and had no legal recourse if her husband chose to beat her, rape her, or lock her away. The Norton marriage would become a notorious example of covetous horrors. George Norton, a barrister and member of Parliament, regularly subjected Caroline to savage beatings. When she attempted to leave him in 1835, he seized their 3 young sons and refused to allow her any contact with them. Under cover, the children legally belonged to him alone. Caroline's desperate letters to friends reveal the agony of maternal separation. "I am a prisoner here, and my children are my prison wardens." She would not see her youngest son for 2 years. Women's property disappeared into their husbands' hands the moment they married. When wealthy heiress Frances Power Cobb inherited £1,000 from her father in 1857, her husband immediately claimed it as his own. "I might as well have thrown the money into the sea," she later wrote. "My husband took possession of it as absolutely as if I had never existed." When Elizabeth Parsons' husband committed her to a private asylum in 1858 to steal her inheritance, she had no legal recourse. Under cover, a husband could confine his wife anywhere he chose. This legal extinction extended to every aspect of a woman's life. She could not make a will without her husband's permission. She could not refuse medical treatment he authorized. She could not prevent him from reading her correspondence or following her movements. As one contemporary observer noted, a married woman in England has no legal existence. She is her husband's cattle, no different from his horse or his dog. The domestic hell. Behind the respectable facades of Victorian homes, wife-beating was not only legal but actively encouraged by religious and medical authorities as a husband's divine right and duty. The popular legal maxim held that a man could beat his wife with a stick no thicker than his thumb. Though this restraint was rarely observed or enforced, Dr. William Acton, whose medical textbook, The Functions and Disorders of the Reproductive Organs, was the standard authority on Victorian sexuality, wrote in 1857, "The husband has the right to enforce sexual intercourse, as this is the wife's duty and his natural right." What we now recognize as marital rape was not only legal, but considered a husband's sacred prerogative. The Diaries of Lady Colin Campbell, published after her scandalous divorce trial in 1886, revealed the sexual horrors many wives endured. Her husband, Lord Colin Campbell, infected her with syphilis through his affairs, then continued to force sexual intercourse upon her despite her illness. "He would not be denied his rights," she wrote, "though it meant my death." When she begged him to use preventative measures to avoid further infection, he responded that such devices were an insult to his manhood. Violence was systematic and brutal. The medical records examined by Frances Power Cobb in 1878 revealed the true extent of domestic brutality. Women arrived with broken bones, knife wounds, burns from hot pokers, and injuries from kicks to the abdomen while pregnant. Dr. Elizabeth Blackwell documented cases of women whose husbands had bitten off their ears, broken their jaws, and deliberately blinded them. The case of Hannah Mullins, recorded in Manchester court records from 1869, illustrates the extremes of marital violence. Her husband, John, had beaten her so severely that she required hospitalization for 3 broken ribs, a fractured skull, and internal bleeding. When she pressed charges, the magistrate sentenced John to 14 days in prison, but also ordered Hannah to submit more willingly to her husband's authority upon his release. The court blamed her shrewish behavior for provoking the attack. Working-class women faced even greater brutality. Factory owner testimonies from parliamentary inquiries in the 1840s revealed that married female workers were expected to turn over their entire wages to their husbands, who often spent the money on alcohol before returning home to beat their wives for failing to provide adequate meals. In the coal mining districts of Wales, Women's rights activist Emmeline Pankhurst documented cases of minors who would strip their wives naked and beat them with leather belts as punishment for perceived domestic failures. Sexual violence within marriage was so normalized that medical texts instructed wives to submit to any sexual act their husbands demanded. Dr. George Nephi's The Physical Life of Woman, published in 1869, advised wives that, however repugnant the husband's demands may seem, the wife must never refuse, as this constitutes a violation of the marriage contract. The trap of motherhood, pregnancy, and childbirth in Victorian marriage were not joyous occasions, but instruments of control and sources of mortal terror. With no access to reliable contraception and no legal right to refuse sexual intercourse, married women faced the constant threat of pregnancy. Each pregnancy brought a significant chance